Okay, so at this point in time, many of you still have to submit homework 1. I just want to make an announcement regarding homework 1. Share my computer sound. 1 sec. Okay. So, okay. Basically, someone asked where the past recordings for the lectures were. They are under here. If you go to class lecture YouTube playlist, you can find them over here. There they are. The first one, there were some technical difficulties because I recorded onto the cloud. I'm still trying to figure that out, but these two are working correctly, and you can find them in the class info slash actually, you can't see this. I have multiple screens. Basically, you go to class info, and then you go to our class, and you go to class lecture YouTube playlist, and that's where it is. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to mention was on the homework, there is this component of providing a Google Drive link to the project. And I just want to make sure that when you're actually submitting that Google Drive link, don't just set the permissions to the Google Drive link so that anyone can view instead of sharing access via email, because otherwise we get a bunch of emails like saying that we got access to this. So if you just set the permissions to the file so that anyone can view it, it's a lot easier to work with, okay? So with that being said, we're going to go over some of the protocol with regards to exporting your projects correctly and all of the other fun implications of working in a software environment and sharing your work with others, okay? So one of the things that we're going to talk about is just the export dialog. So if you have a particular project, I think this is what we were working on last time. If you have a particular project, and you have your tracks all set up in a particular way. Oh wait, some of these words sound wrong. This got messed up somehow. In any event, if you have a particular project, what you have to do is you have to export your work at some point, right? And in order to do that, you have to go to File, and you have to go to Export Audio/Video, and then you can basically export your audio that way, right? So when you do that, basically you'll be given an option to basically export a project. Well, actually, what we're actually doing right here is exporting the MP3. So if you export the audio/video, we're actually exporting the MP3. Or the WAV file, which basically will allow you to hear it on your media player. But what you also have to do is you have to include your project folder as well. So with that being said, there's some information on this on the OneNote. If you go to the OneNote and you go to playback and export, exporting audio, there's some interesting sections, interesting aspects to this. Let's just go through these components really quickly. So when you're exporting audio/video, you're given an option to select which track you're rendering, okay? So if you're selecting the master track, basically what that's referring to is you're just exporting, basically, you're only exporting one track, and that's basically the master return track, which is where all the other tracks are being sent to. So you're only getting a composite of all these tracks instead of the individual tracks themselves. They call individual tracks stems, okay? So if you want to export just the individual tracks, you have the capability to do that. So if you go back to that export audio dialog, you can actually, where it says rendered track, you could actually export all the individual tracks, or you can just export certain individual tracks, right? So that's an important thing to be aware of. But if you leave it faster, you will export a composite of all the tracks combined as you hear it.
I love you.
Okay. Oh yeah, make sure you're muted. Some of you have not muted yourselves. I'll figure out a way to change that in the Zoom settings so that you're automatically muted. With that being said, hopefully that makes sense, this part right here. Now, if we go back, oh, someone raised their hand. Mark.
Yeah, hey, Professor, can you show us where to turn in the assignment? Because at least for me, on my Canvas, I don't see the assignments tab.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Me too, Professor.
I realized that I think I might have included the assignment. So I'll just quickly do this and I'll show you the protocols. If I go to courses, Music 7, quickly create an assignment. So you get an inside sneak peek into how this gets done. I believe the number of points for this assignment was set to 9 points. Okay, so it's 9 points. Refer to OneNote / homework / assignment requirements, right? One sec. Assignment requirements. You could submit text entry, media recordings, file upload.
Yeah, what's up?
Unlimited attempts. Okay. And assigned to everyone. Unlimited attempts due tomorrow. Can someone spot that person and I can just call them out? Who is the individual? Someone put it in the chat.
They just went on mute.
Okay, good. All right, so with that being said, this is homework 1. All right, don't forget to do the discussion section component. Okay, so this is what we have so far. I'll save and publish this. And then also, in addition to submitting here, you will also have to go to the discussions. Gosh, sorry, I didn't prepare this. Moment. This will only take a second. Inside sneak peek into how this works. But in any event, if we go to discussions and we create a new discussion, call this homework 1 discussion. Encourage others and be encouraged. We're just trying to form a supportive community. Allow threaded replies, which means that you can reply to individuals on their unique thread instead of replying to everyone about everything. And this is, yeah, I guess that is done. This is the homework 1 discussion. And there we go. So on this particular discussion section, this is where you're going to submit the audio file itself, right? Well, no, let me back up. You're going to submit your audio file here. You're only going to submit your audio file here. Let me back up. Let's start with the assignment. For the assignment, if you refer to the assignment requirements, you have to include all of these things, right? That's clear. You have to include 4 of these things. You have to include the audio file, you have to include the Google Drive link to your Ableton project folder, and you have to include the screenshots, okay? So you have to do these 3 things, right? Under discussions, you only have to embed your audio file, right? Because the class won't necessarily care as much about all the screenshots and all that other information, the other context. You could provide context if you'd like, but for the discussion, just provide the audio file and a little bit of context. But for the assignment, you have to provide the audio file, the screenshot context, as well as the Google Drive folder, if that makes sense, right? So hopefully this is all accessible now. Oh, the assignment tab is not published. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. This is all good stuff. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, let's put this back up here. There we go. It should be published now. Okay, great. Now everyone should be able to submit and access everything.
Professor?
Yes.
So for the 1 point discussion, point for homework is just we upload the audio file on discussion, not discussion other people's, right?
No, yes, that's the 1 point that you get for uploading it to discussions. The points you get for participation, because your participation grade, we go back to the syllabus, your participation grade hinges on you needing to comment on 5 of your fellow student tracks, okay? So that comes.
So that is just for like after the homework is due, right?
Yeah, after the homework is due. You have to
Okay,
comment
got
on
that.
all of your fellow students' tracks for each assignment, okay?
Okay, got that. Thanks.
All right, so, whoops. That's a good question. So let me just clear that up over here. If we go back to the homework. Okay. For your participation grade, comment on 5 of your fellow students' tracks for each assignment. Okay, hopefully this all makes sense. I'm gonna go back into Ableton. Feel free to ask any more questions, raise your hand, chime in, however you wanna do it. So basically, we can export our entire track. And then also let me actually go back to my notes. Under playback and export, you're basically given options for the length of the export, right? Because you can envision a scenario where you're only exporting like the first measure, or you're exporting the first couple of measures, but you're given agency to export as much or as little as you'd like. So invariably, everyone pay attention to this, invariably there are students who export too much audio. They export like an hour-long track, and then audio only exists for like the first minute, and then it's like 59 minutes of nothing. And then I'll sit here listening to the whole thing. I'm like, wait, something might happen in 58 minutes. So, don't leave me hanging unless you really are intentional about it. And then I will enjoy the final result. But just make sure that your domain is correctly set up for exporting audio. So for instance, if I go back to Ableton and I select a region, one way to kind of ensure that you're selecting the region, selecting a good export length, is pressing Command A or Control A. And then if I export audio/video, what you'll see, no, this is bad actually. This is not what I recommend. No, this is correct. If you press Control A, what you should find is that Ableton will only select stuff for the region of audio that you've composed stuff for. So if I press Command A, it'll export up till here, okay? That's pretty good. In reality, you probably don't want to export till there. You probably only want to export till here, right? So, or until here, or whatever, right? So you can basically select the region of time you want to export. And then you can, once you select the region, you basically, it'll reflect the render length over here. And we know about bars, beats, and sixteenths. Also, I saw that someone raised their hand. I'll get to you in just one moment. So the render length, just confirm that what you've selected matches the render length over here. And the render start matches this as well. So just to clarify, these triplets of numbers represent bars, beats, and sixteenths, right? If we kind of reflect and think back to the rhythm stuff that we talked about, the Ableton beat scheme, there's 3 numbers and they represent bars, beats, and sixteenths, right? So bars are measures and beats are subdivisions within that measure, and sixteenths are basically taking each beat and subdividing it even more, right? So just check, like you could see over here on the very top ruler, that we're past measure 13. So this looks approximately correct, right? Measure 14 is when the export ends. Measure 1 is when the export starts. Okay, I believe someone raised their hand. I see you on the video. I just don't remember your name. You are Steven.
It was me. Yes, that was me. I just have a quick question because my chordal instrument has like a really nice, at the very end, has a really nice fade to it. Like it's sort of the sound lingers, like the vibrations, and it slowly fades. But when I export, that sort of, like when you listen to it in Ableton, that fade occurs. But then when I exported it, it just kind of cuts it off. It goes on it, and then it stops. Would extending the amount that it records, would that fix that issue?
I believe so. I think that's a really good question. Yeah. So I think just to kind of paraphrase just to understand what you said, there might be the sound effect right here that like it lingers all the way to here, And by exporting it, by only exporting this, you're cutting off the release of the sound. So yeah, it should conceivably fix it if you just extend the export region. So those are the things that you figure out and you adjust. Like you can't, there's no hard and fast rule for that because, you know, command A-ing your project won't necessarily give you that. But, you know, there might be some intelligence baked into Ableton's algorithm. Maybe the reason they're selecting this entire region up till here and not till here is because it anticipates that this sound plays until here. I'm not exactly sure, but you have to kind of check and listen back to make sure that things sound good. And it's fun to listen back to your work. So like after you export your track, just listen back and listen to what you did. And if it takes an hour to listen back, unless you just released an EP, you probably didn't mean to do that. So just check that your boundaries are correct, okay? Going back to the OneNote, back to playback and export. Sample rate. We talked a little bit about sample rate, about the idea that audio data comes out with much more data than MIDI data. So this value right here just basically tells you that when you're exporting the audio, it's going to export it with a resolution of 44,100 samples per second. And chances are you can leave this number alone, but we'll talk about certain we might talk about certain implications of this number. Interestingly, just to kind of create a little bit of thought in your mind, this number happens to be this: 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 5 times 7 times 7. And I did that wrong because that's not correct. 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 5 times, I keep typing 8. Sorry, let me try this again. 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 5 times 7 times 7 is 44,100. So basically, interestingly, mathematically, though, 2, 3, 5, 7 are the first 4 prime numbers, and they are the squares of the first 4 prime numbers multiplied by each other. So there's a mathematical reason for why this sample rate is 44,100, and we can talk about that eventually, but right now it's not important. Then you can also choose what type of file you export, which is, you could choose AIFF or WAV. I would suggest WAV because I think AIFF is like Apple product, but actually I think most operating systems might be able to open it, but just to be safe, you could, I think Canvas will be able to import WAV or AIFF, right? But you don't even have to do this. You could click off because this is exporting a high quality render, right? But truth be told, MP3 is fine. It's not as high quality, but you probably won't even notice. It's like, it's so subtle of a difference. Like for the sake of grading this for class, an MP3 render is fine. And it probably will not clog up Canvas as much. It's a smaller file size. So you could turn this button off and turn this button on. And that way you have a small file, because some people, when they upload to Canvas, they're like, hey, Canvas isn't letting me upload my 100 gigabyte WAV file. And it's not going to be 100 gigabytes unless it's like the track is like 17 days long. But it might be, it'll be like an order of magnitude bigger than the MP3 file. And if you're just like trying to share it with friends, MP3 is probably adequate until you want to like officially release a high quality or more high quality version. Again, it's so marginally, it's not like on a blind test, you probably won't be able to tell the difference, to be honest. Then you click the export button. So that's something to be aware of. Now, I do want to mention something else. In the homework, I mentioned this setting called collect all and save, okay? Now, what this has to do with, in order to understand this, we have to go into Ableton's file folder structure, okay? So give me one moment while I get this set up. Projects, okay? So essentially, let me do something really quickly. Let me let me save this project. And I'll save this as Ableton projects. This is also useful information, I think. I tend to have a certain way of organizing my projects. I like putting all my projects in the same folder. And this is a conclusion that I've came up with. I like labeling my project by title. So I like calling it, like, I don't know, class test. And then I like putting in parentheses some information about the instrumentation, piano, bass, drums. And then I like putting like potentially who worked on this, like, you know, maybe like music 7. So I can, by putting these tags here, I can search for things that are salient. Like I'll be like, hey, what was that? Like, you know, was this a hip hop track? Maybe then after that I can write hip hop. So that way I can search for all my hip hop projects and it's all accessible. This is a conclusion I've came up with, and it's been working really well for me. So then when I click save, it'll save a project. Okay, and then I guess I'll just leave these temporary files in place. And then if I go to my Finder, I will find a folder with this particular project in, okay? And what I find in this folder is my ALS file, which is basically like the Ableton project file. This is like the file you double click and open. And then there's some project info, okay? Now, if you start incorporating more things in your project, Ableton will start adding other folders in for you. Like it'll add the samples folder. It'll add this backup folder for like old versions of your project in case you make a mistake. The project info will stay the same. It'll just have some config info for you, okay? But collect all and save, this is why you collect all and save, okay? Let's say I borrow a sample from my computer. Okay, I have a sample from my computer, and like, for instance, I'm in my downloads folder, and there's some sample here, right? I don't know what this is. There's some sample in here, maybe like, gosh, maybe this violin.wave, okay? And I bring this sample into my project, and there it is, right? Now, here's the thing. In this project folder, do you see any reference to that file in my project folder? None, right? Because what my computer is doing, it's assuming that I'm going to be opening this project on my computer, on this computer. So it doesn't need to make a copy of it into this folder because it's going to assume that I will be on this computer and it automatically links to that WAV file without me doing without having to work on where it is. Like it automatically links to it because it has knowledge of where it is, and like it uses this config folder to probably do that. This config file to probably do that. But if I take this folder and I give it to my friend, when I give this project to my friend, or when your TAs or me open it, if we decide to do that, we won't have access to this WAV file because it's not in this folder. It was only on my folder in my home machine. And so what you have to do, and so look at this now, and notice how there's no samples folder. Now, if I go here and I click File, Collect All, and Save, it'll ask me some questions. It'll say, which files do you want to copy into the project? And this is the most important one. Files from elsewhere? Click Yes. Okay. Files from other projects? Sure, yes. Files from user library? Sure, why not? Files from factory packs? Most likely, these two, the user library and the factory packs, will be consistent on everyone's machine. So if you didn't copy these over, everyone else probably will have these anyway. But to be safe, just click yes, okay? So if I click OK now, Ableton will do this. It'll basically think about it. And now it basically transferred all of those samples into the folder, right? So now when I share this folder with someone, it'll all be there, and it's thinking about it, and it did it. And now look at this. This folder now has a folder called samples in it. You see that? This folder called samples now has this folder called imported, and it imported this audio file, right? So, so this is important, okay? So make sure, and this is all under playback and export, make sure that when you're working, you collect all and save, okay? Because that way your project folder, which will have everything contained within it, okay? So when you're uploading something to Google Drive, what you're gonna share is not this file, okay? You are gonna share this entire folder because this folder is what you need for the complete, it has all the information you need, okay? So make sure you share the complete folder. Okay, so let's play a game. Let's play to export or not to export, okay? So is this what I need to export? Say yes or no.
No.
How about this?
Yes.
Okay, I need to improve this game. It's a little too easy. But I don't want to take it for granted because invariably every year someone submits just this. And then there's nothing I can do. When I open Ableton, it'll just say media files are missing. Like instead of seeing this waveform, it'll look like this and nothing will be here, right? Okay. So in any event, this is probably intuitive for especially all you like software engineering people, just maintaining all your assets in a cohesive way, right? So with that being said, let's talk about some more interesting things, okay? So let's get on to, by the way, I've noticed some of you have turned off your videos and there's hardly any videos on at all. So I please request you to turn on those videos. Let's get some more faces on here, shall we? That's what I like to see. Come on, more people, please, please, please. I'm begging of you. Okay, very good. I will keep bugging you about that. Okay, so now let's get back to the homework requirements. And so far, everything makes sense about this. I mean, you've also had discussion sections. Drum patterns, chord progressions. You can make use of a scale which coincides with the key, the chord progression that you utilized, right? We talked about that. Audio samples, and your favorites bar, okay? Any questions about that? Oh yeah, someone asked, does a sample have to be music-based or it can be any random clip with sound? It can be any random clip with sound, okay? So for instance, if you go into the samples section of Ableton, you will find a bunch of samples. I mean, theoretically, all of these are musical, right? It's just how you use them, right? So just use them in a musical way. That's what I'm asking you to do, okay? Someone asked, are we putting our descriptions and screenshots for the components of the homework just into Canvas? Or do they go onto a separate document that is then uploaded? Do it all on Canvas. So like what I'd really ask you to do is to watch this video that a former student made, because it talks about how beautiful it is when you embed it correctly. Like when you embed the screenshots using the interface, it's so much easier than having pictures uploaded. Like I just can't communicate how much easier it is to look at work when it's done in this way. So just follow the protocol. In fact, on Thursday, I might even go through before the homeworks were graded and just look through assignments and just kind of collectively comment on their, not on their quality from any musical standpoint, but on their quality from the standpoint of submission, okay? Because it'll make everyone's life easier when they're grading, okay? Can you explain the music bar part of the assignment, the favorites bar, right? So if we go back to the homework, there is this component of your favorites bar with a lot of interesting sounds. So all that refers to is the idea that you can right-click any sound that you find in Ableton in the browser and assign it to a particular collection, okay? So I guess instead of calling this the favorites bar, this is really the collections bar, okay? So that's a mistype. I guess I could change that. Your favorites, your collections bar. Right. It's basically allowing you to assign any sound to a variety of collections, okay? So for instance, if I decide I like this drum, I could right-click it and I can assign it to this collection of drums, right? Okay. Someone asked, could we go over the scale coinciding with the chord progression? Absolutely. That was a tough concept, so it's definitely worth reinvestigating. But essentially, yeah, just to tie the knot about this, collections, you can access more collections and expose which collections you want to see by going to this edit menu. And then you could rename the collections. And that way you can organize your sounds according to a way that makes sense to you and they're more easily accessible. Okay? Okay, so we talked a lot about stuff, music theory related last time. We've talked about rhythm, we've talked about pitches. Let's slow down a little bit and let's revisit some of this stuff that we talked about, okay? So for one, we have a track right here, and this track right here is basically our drum track, okay? So I'll rename this drum track, okay? Then we have a track right here, which with nothing on it, so I'll just delete it, okay? And then this track right here, I'm gonna rename chords, okay? I'll rename this piano actually. Piano chords, okay? Because it's useful to name tracks what instrument they are, okay? That's like the convention. So like since a piano instrument is on this track, like this is a grand piano, I name it as a piano, name the track piano, and then potentially include what thing the piano is doing, like it's piano chords, right? This is redundant, so I can delete this. This is like a violin sample, right? So someone asked, even when I press tab and it switches, I do not see the tracks in arrangement view. I only see the tracks when I go to session view and then double click an individual track. Meaning, you don't see any information in arrangement view when you go over here. Yeah, you got to record those tracks so that they get arranged, laid down in arrangement. So this is an important thing. Just to not confuse you, I would avoid going into session view in general. Like you might be recording clips in here, right? Session view allows you to record clips, and they allow you to put them in any order you want. You can sequence them however, whatever order you want. So for instance, if I have a drum clip right here, what I could do is I could put that clip in session view, and I could view that clip in session view, right? And then if I have a piano chords clip right here, I can go to session view, and I can view that clip right here, right? I have a violin clip right here. It's an audio clip. I can put it over here. And then I could like play these clips in session view. Play the violin. I could turn off the violin. I could play a different part of the violin, right? There's so many different things I can do. But this is a non-sequential arrangement of music, okay? But for the sequential arrangement of music, I'd advise you to be in arrangement view, okay? So when you're in arrangement view, you see everything logically from left to right. So if you've been in session view, it's not the end of the world. You can just go and copy these clips over. You can select all of these clips, copy them, go over here, and then paste them, and they'll all appear over here, right? But I would recommend you stay in arrangement view because it's more consistent with other softwares that you'll encounter. Okay, so did that answer your question? Is that what happened? Okay, cool. There's another way to record. You could actually literally record session clips into arrangement view, but that's a little confusing, so I won't talk about that now. So with that being said, the question that we're kind of focusing on right now is how do you correlate scales and chords to kind of match pitch, okay? So what do we have here? We have chords, okay? Now let's create a new MIDI track, and we'll call this melody. We'll call this like piano melody. Okay, so I'll put a piano over here. I'll copy this piano device. I'll go to the piano melody track, and I'll copy that piano device into the device view for this piano melody. So now I've got a track with a device, okay? But I still need a clip, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna create a clip, and I'm gonna insert an empty MIDI clip, okay? And remember what we talked about. This particular chord clip that we have is in a particular key, okay? This chord clip is in a particular key. And this key in this MIDI clip is represented by the first letter that you see over here, okay? Now also, this key could be in major or minor, okay? So there's a couple of gotchas, okay? So for instance, give me one moment here. Going back to these progressions, you have major chord progressions and you have minor chord progressions. You have things in major keys and things in minor keys, right? And just to kind of clarify what a key is basically just a collection of notes centered around a specific note, right? So if we have, you know, a piano, one octave of piano notes has 12 notes, right? So we're basically taking a subset of those 12 notes and we're choosing 7 of them. And that is basically a key. And we're centering it around this particular note, in this case, C, right? The C major scale is centered around the note C, and it contains these 7 notes. Okay. So ultimately what we have to do is when we're looking at a chord progression in our Ableton browser, we're presented with a variety of major key chord progressions and minor key chord progressions. Okay, so that's the first choice we can make. Then we can choose what key we want to be in. So if the first letter is A, we're in the key of A major, right? Because we're in the major folder, so we're in the key of A major. Okay. If the first letter is A flat, well, we're in the key of A flat major, right? If the first letter is B, well, we're in the key of B major. Okay, if we go to the minor folder, the first letter is C, we're in the key of C minor, right? So that's an important thing to be aware of, because that basically, that key telling you that you're in C minor will tell you 2 things. It'll tell you the scale, which is basically the 7 notes that you have available to you, as well as the center, the most important note within the key, which is the key center, okay? So essentially, when you have a chord progression like this one, which I believe I borrowed, I'll just recreate a new one just for fun, just so I'm on the same page. Let's say I go over to the minor section, and I go to A, and I say, well, I'm going to choose this MIDI clip right here. So we're in the key of what? Can I ask the class, what key are we in?
A minor.
Am I sharing my screen? I am, right?
A minor.
A minor, right? So I'm going to grab this clip right here, and I have a progression now in the key of A minor, okay? And now, if I want to create a melody that coincides with this chord progression, by the way, we can listen to this chord progression. Okay. Now, if I want to create a melody that coincides with that chord progression, what I can do is I can go to a MIDI clip. All right. So I went to a MIDI clip, and now I can basically select. I can select the key that I want my MIDI editor to kind of visualize, okay? Because by default, the MIDI editor is not visualizing any key at all. It's referencing it's just showing you a piano, right? But wouldn't it be nice if it like only selectively showed you the notes that were in a particular key, right? So the idea is, let's take this key that we know is A minor. We know that our song is basically in A minor. And in the MIDI clips that we're working in, let's basically choose the scale, which is basically a scale and a key are somewhat interchangeable. They're interrelated, I should say. So we're basically choosing a scale which coincides with the key of A minor. And you can see how the MIDI editor changes. And now what it's showing you, all the purple notes are the notes that are in A minor, okay? And if we want to go one step further, if we only want to see the purple notes, we can click scale. And now the only notes that you see are the notes that are in A minor. Okay. So now, by the way, what is the most important note of A minor?
A.
How did you know? Okay, yeah. The most important note of A minor is A. And look what Ableton does. It actually says A. You probably want to see this note, don't you? And it shows you this note being a little more prominent, right? So it's saying this note is really important, okay? So now if I'm creating a melody, let me go to the pencil tool. I can press B or I can press this. Let me just draw some notes centered around A, just for fun. That sounds decent, okay? Now listen to how bad this would sound if I didn't choose A, okay? I should be careful when I use words like bad and good because everything's subjective. Let's say I choose this note. This is going to sound not as good. Because right now I'm basically not matching. I'm supposed to privilege the note A, okay? But I'm not. So this might be a little boring if you just choose A all the way, right? So you could center yourself around A and just every now and then choose another note. Oh, wait, I'm in A major all of a sudden. I have to go to A minor. Also, it makes sense to have things on downbeats. So unless you want things to sound syncopated. Also, you could simplify your life by choosing less rhythms to work with. So you can do something like this, change the grid resolution, which the shortcut for changing the grid resolution is what?
Command plus? Or command one?
Command 1 or 2 to decrease or increase, right? So let's just play the notes in order, okay? I keep going back to A minor, A major. We go back to A minor. Let's just play the notes in order. This is good. Right? It sounds a little better when you make your life simpler. You choose less notes, right? But this is what I mean by kind of matching a scale with a chord progression, okay? This is really important because every year, this is the first year I've actually realized that, hey, rather than kind of teaching how to make this chord progression from scratch, there's MIDI packs that have this information, and I can simplify this process by just showing you how to work with a MIDI chord progression. So in the past, students who didn't know music theory would often write things that sounded a little dissonant because they would be interested in doing this, and not know what a key center is, and then they wouldn't know how to correlate their stuff, maybe a little dissonant. But hopefully, if you follow these directions correctly, you can actually have something that sounds pretty cool with minimal effort. And this is, my background is in piano, so I often don't compose this way. I will play things live, but this is an interesting way to compose. And I encourage you to learn how to do this. In fact, you have to because it's on the assignment. But hopefully that makes sense. Any questions about this? And then someone asked, how do you navigate to Ableton's built-in progressions? And I saw a question before that, so I'll answer that as well. In case I didn't answer your question, just just ping it again and I'll try to answer it. How do you navigate to Ableton's built-in progressions? I don't believe Ableton does have any built-in progressions. So what I did was I actually added my own progressions here, right? I actually went over here and I added my own folder of progressions, which you can incidentally find on the OneNote if you go to music theory, chords, right? You can find the MIDI chords and chord progressions over here, okay? This is where I want you to look, okay? That's where you find the progressions, right? So for instance, if I go back to the homework section, in case this is a little hard to find, which hopefully it isn't, I'll just specify where that is. So you go to OneNote, Ableton, music theory, chords. What was it? It was under a folder called MIDI chords and chord progressions, right? Okay. Okay, so you'll be able to find it there. All right. Great. And then I saw an earlier question that was, do we have to select one from Ableton or we can make something on our own? Absolutely, you can make something on your own. This is just more, there's so many ways to do it. This is just for, in case you don't know any music theory and this is very daunting, you could borrow from someone else. Stravinsky said, good composers borrow, great composers steal. So steal all you want. It's how you curate the information that is, I think, that is you, right? You can't invent everything. We didn't invent Ableton. We didn't invent a speaker and a microphone, and we didn't invent a computer. So you can't get down on yourself if you didn't make every single thing in your project. Just use what you can and discard the rest. Use what you have in front of you, and be creative with what you've been given. Don't feel bad if you didn't invent Microsoft Windows because it doesn't have anything to do with making music necessarily. Obviously, you need an operating system, but that's not what we're working on right now, right? So, okay. So now what I want to talk about is kind of shifting gears. Okay, sorry, I keep seeing questions about chords, so I want to stay on topic before I move on. How do I make the chords that you provided last longer? Okay, when I stretch the sound, there's breaks where it starts over. Okay. Okay, this is a great question. Okay, this is actually worth a little detour. Okay. So is this what's happening to you? Like when you expand this, you don't see notes appear over and over again? Is that what's happening with you, Kristen?
So it wasn't a chord progression, it was just a single chord. And when I stretch it, like the sound looks consistent on the track, but when I play it, it's like ding, ding, like it keeps starting over again.
Can you share your screen and we can maybe demonstrate this for everyone?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, manage.
You have to enable screen sharing.
It should work now.
Okay. Can you see my screen? So like when I play it,
Do you share computer sound? Can you unshare?
oh yeah. Let me do that. Okay. It does that.
Okay, I'm requesting remote control. Okay. So this is the chord progression right here. And it's just basically. Oh, okay. This is a great question. Actually, this is hugely important. So I'm actually going to stop sharing. What I want you to be aware of is these little tick marks right here. You see these little tick marks?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked this question because this is actually kind of what I was hoping was going wrong. I know it's not. It sounds like I'm being a little sadistic here, hoping you got something wrong, but it's a good educational teaching moment. So this is what I want to explain. This is really important. I don't even know if there's a OneNote document on this. I have to check. So let me actually go to back to the Ableton section, go to editing and recording, and let's talk about MIDI clips. There's one section right here. I guess in general, clips. Okay. Let me actually go over here and create a new section called aliased versus unaliased clips. Okay. So there's two ways you can kind of create a clip in Ableton. This is really important, okay? So notice in this situation, okay, if this clip is, what's the length of this clip, first of all? What is the length of this particular clip? This clip has a length of what?
2 bars.
Well,
Or wait, no, 4 bars there.
it has a length
Right.
of 4 bars, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and where can you see that? How do you know that it has a length of 4 bars? Let's actually let's try to understand how we know it has a length of 4 bars. I'm gonna make this a little clearer. How do you know that a clip has a length of 4 bars? Okay, so let's go back over here. So I've got this right here. What are 2 ways you can know that this clip has a length of 4 bars?
The timeline.
Timeline. You basically see right here that the clip has a length of 4 bars. But this isn't actually what you want to pay attention to, right? Clip appears to last 4 measures long. But the real way to find, okay, the real way to find how long a clip is by looking over here where it says length. That's the real good way to find out how long a clip is. And right here, as we talked about in our previous rhythm notation thing, the clip right here is going to be 4 bars long, right? So let me actually promote this subpage. And I'm going to create a new page. I'm going to make this a whole subheading, okay? Finding the length. 1 second. Let me just copy this. The length of a clip. So this is what we kind of talked about so far. You can find the length of a clip in this way, right? But in reality, you could have a clip length that is independent from its length in the arrangement. So let me try to show you this, right? So right here, what you see is a clip that's 4 bars long, okay? How do you know it's 4 bars long? You look at this value right here, all right? It's 4 bars long. But what if I made this clip 2 bars long, okay? If I made this clip 2 bars long, how long is this clip occupying in the arrangement right now?
4 bars.
4 bars,
4 bars.
okay? So if I make this clip 2 bars long, what do you think will happen over here? Do you think it'll still occupy 4 bars? What will happen is it'll actually alias. It'll actually only play these 2 bars, the first 2 bars, not these 2 bars, but it'll play them twice. And you see that little ticker right here? It's basically saying this clip is occupying 4 bars, but it's basically repeating twice, right? And a consequence of aliasing a clip is that if I change one of these notes, all the aliased copies will also change. So look, there's 2 copies of this clip. There's 1 aliased copy of this clip, and the alias will also change. Okay? Right? So let me actually formalize this, okay? So going back over here, the length of a clip, over here, the clip appears to last 4 measures long in the arrangement, but this isn't necessarily how long the clip actually is, right? That's really important to know. The clip can actually be found, its length can actually be found by going into clip view, as seen in the clip view, right? So if you basically have a clip in this situation right here, whose length is basically different from the amount of time in the arrangement, you will start experiencing aliasing, okay? So right here, you can see over here that the clip, let me make this yellow again for consistency, the clip is actually taking, this clip appears to be occupying 4 measures within the arrangement. And then over here, you can see that the clip length, though, is what, class? What is the clip length?
2.
2, right? However, the clip is only 2 bars long, okay? Which means that it is aliasing in the arrangement, which means that aliased copies of the clip are created in the arrangement in order to fill in the time. Okay? And if we're looking more deeply into this, and if we look at the specific clip itself, you can easily spot an aliased clip like so. You'll know if a clip is aliasing, and this actually goes back to the earlier question when you're sharing a screen. You'll know if a clip is aliasing if you see a little ticker in the middle of it. Right? So that's important to know. So this kind of creates an interesting situation. So what happened with that track earlier is that their clip length wasn't long enough. Their clip length was too short. Okay? And so they thought they were extending the length of the MIDI note, but they were actually just creating many copies of the MIDI note, aliased copies of the MIDI note. So for instance, if I make this clip length really, really short, look what happens. If I make this clip length 1 bar long, I can do that. Let's say I make the clip length, 1 beat long, but 0 bars long, right? See that? Now I can make, basically now it's just repeating this one note over and over and over and over and over, over and over and over again, right? You see what's going on here? Oh gosh, you can't see what's going on here because you can't see it. Delete these return tracks so you can see it better. Collapse this master track. This violin track over there, right? So you can see what's happening, right? As I increase, you see the aliasing that's happening? It's pretty cool that Ableton can do that and manage that, right? So what was happening in their case that we saw earlier was that the clip was too short, okay? When the clip is too short, and you want to fill in the arrangement with a short clip, it'll just keep making copies of it. So what you want to do is you want to make sure the clip is adequately long. So in their case, their clip probably wanted to be like 4 measures long, right? Okay, that's why the note just kept repeating instead of extending. Okay. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. It's a confusing aspect of Ableton, but it's a powerful aspect of Ableton. It makes you have to do less work. In case you only want to use the same information over and over again, rather than making copies of it, you can reference the same thing over and over again. With that being said, you can actually make copies of this, and I can paste this, and this is its own independent copy, right? And now if I make a change to this, this doesn't change because you don't see that little ticker here, right? You see a ticker here, right? Notice how when I make a change to this, all of these aliased copies change, but this one doesn't change because this isn't linked to that, right? Makes sense? I'm glad that someone asked that because I'm glad that we finally have formal documentation on that. Okay. So let me go back. There are some questions. Someone asked, can you explain, for the screenshots, you can absolutely, you can have sentences about how you got there. That's what I want. I want some context because it helps everyone kind of understand what you're trying to get at. You know, be as vulnerable as you want. Be like, oh, I wanted to get this particular sound, but I couldn't. You know, anything you can say to kind of help, for us to help you is relevant information. So just like expound it however you'd like. Are there any reasons why the chord progressions downloaded from the OneNote are not able to be used in Ableton? Ableton will not allow you to drag them. You may need to unzip the file. That's correct. Basically, when you download the folder, you just have to double click it and extract all the contents. Okay, so that's an important thing to kind of be aware of. Any other questions about this? Make sense? Okay. Yeah, basically it's different on Windows and Mac. On Mac, if you basically double click that folder and it should extract. It'll look like a locked folder and it'll become like an unlocked folder when you finally extract it. So for instance, let me see if I have an example. I don't know if I have an example, but it's just Google like how to unzip a file on Windows or Mac and you'll be able to do it. Okay. With that, with that being said, let's actually let's change gears and talk a little bit about the fact that you can do this for audio as well, right? I believe you can do this for audio. I was so certain a second ago, but I just want to make sure. Right. So for instance, if I have an audio file right here, you can't do this for audio. So I was wrong. Unless, is there a way? No, unless you put on loop mode. Let's see. Let me see if there's a way to do this. Yeah, if you turn on loop mode, you turn on warp, and you turn on loop mode, you can do this for audio as well, which is interesting. So if you make changes to the audio somehow, we haven't talked about how you can make changes to audio, but if for some reason you make a change to the audio by making some transformation, you'll see that all the alias copies of the audio also change as well, which is pretty cool. Okay. We won't talk about this yet because audio has its own kind of hiccups. And things we'll deal with. We'll probably talk about that next class. But what I want to talk about now is this idea of automation, okay? Because what you might be finding out is that Ableton has a lot of cool sounds. And you might like certain sounds. And you might want to change the property of a particular sound over time, okay? So for instance, let's say you want to do something like this. Let's say you have the volume of a track right here, right? Let's say you're playing a track, it's playing drums, and let's say you want the volume of this track to just start from nothing and increase over time, right? You see the volume right here is set to -5.9, right? Oh, by the way, I see a lot of videos shutting off. I don't know if it's because I'm being boring or if you're just tuning out. So please turn on those videos so I can better gauge your facial expressions of boredom or excitement or just some random thought about, you know, maybe you're eating food or I don't know, just so I have something to look at and give me something to work with. All right, very good. Let's see more of those videos, please, please, please. I beg of you. Okay, with that being said, the task that we're trying to kind of facilitate is for the volume to start at a low level and for it to increase over time. Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, the volume is right here. Okay, you can change the volume of a track by messing with this meter right here. if you open up info view on the bottom left, you can actually see that parameter coincide correctly, right? So the track volume is right here, okay? That all makes sense. Now, what if you want to change this parameter over time? So let me actually refer to you where these notes are so I can consult my notes as well. If you go to automation, there's a whole section on automation. Automation is basically this idea. Let's say from one moment you want the value of the volume to be this, and the next moment you want the value of the volume to be this. If you've ever worked with video software, you're familiar with this idea called keyframing. Automation is basically keyframing, okay? So how do you do that in an audio software, okay? Basically, you have to turn on the automation mode in order to do this, okay? So what you do is you go into Ableton and you turn on automation mode, which is this little button right here. But you can press A to turn on automation mode. Incidentally, if you have your MIDI keyboard open and you press A, it won't do that. So you have to make sure that, you could just press this button if you're in doubt, right? So when you press this button, you see automation mode appear, okay? And what you see are a bunch of dashed lines, okay? Now, if you click any of these dashed lines, they become solid, okay? What that means is you're committing automation. At this point in time, this value, this volume bar, notice if I move this volume bar down, you see this red line move up and down. It's dashed because I haven't committed it to any particular value. I'm basically saying that or it's just one value throughout. If it's one value throughout and I haven't committed it, it'll just appear dashed, okay? Like this value doesn't change over the course of time, so Ableton just initializes it as this value that is, not meant to be changed, right? But if I click the value, if I click the line, notice how right here it's saying 10 point, if I hover over it, a breakpoint will appear and it'll say negative 10.3 decibels, which basically is saying, at this point in time, I want this to be a negative 10.3 decibels. Well, didn't I say I want it to be soft and I want it to open up over time? So let's actually bring this down here and let's create another breakpoint and let's increase the value so that it gets louder over time. Okay. So now if I play this back, you will actually see this particular box change its value over time. See that? One more time. Mind-blowing, right? You might think this is not that cool, but it's amazingly cool because what you can do is you can basically change a parameter over time, which can yield you all kinds of interesting effects. Like, for instance, filter effects. Like we'll talk about some cool filter effects. Since I won't explain what I'm doing really quickly. I'll explain quickly what I'm doing, but not go into depth. I'll grab a little equalizer, for instance. I'll grab this little, I'll grab this auto filter. And let's say I want to automate something like this. Let's say I want to automate this. Give me 1 second. Let's say I want to do something like this. Right? What I need to do in that situation is basically change a parameter over time, right? This is automation's job to do this, right? You might like that sound. You might want to change the sound to evolve over time. It might be something much more complicated. The sound parameter you're trying to modulate might be much more sophisticated and complicated than a simple volume parameter, right? But here's the key thing to understand about automation. You have to understand how it works within Ableton. Okay, you have to understand where and how to read it. Okay. So, for instance, just to kind of back up, we talked about this idea of simple volume automation. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to click the parameter that you want to modulate. Okay. Modulation just means change. Okay. So you want to click the parameter, in this case, the volume parameter that you want to change. Okay. So you click it, right? When you click that parameter, the corresponding graph of that parameter over time appears. Okay. If I click a different parameter, you'll see a different graph appears, right? So first thing to remember is whatever parameter you click, that's the graph that will show up in that track lane, okay? Important to know. All right. So in this case, I'm clicking the volume parameter, and then you see that graph appear on the track, right? Now, the other thing to kind of keep in mind is that what you're actually automating, the actual parameter, will appear right here in the track. Okay. So for instance, what's happening when I click this volume, right? What do you notice? Basically, the top thing that this is referring to is the device. Okay. So this, even though you might not think of this as a device like that you can use in device view, this is a device. This device Ableton considers as being the mixer. Okay. So this parameter fits into the mixer device. Okay. And the specific parameter within this mixer device is known as the track volume, right? So essentially, the parameter that you're modulating or trying to automate will show up both on the graph over here, but it'll also show up as a readout over here, okay? So that's what I'm trying to explain to you. You'll see this parameter, the value of that parameter be shown as this dashed red line, right? And you'll see what the parameter is in this like orange box. And you'll see the actual, when you click the parameter in this yellow box, you will see all of these things change, right? Hopefully that all makes sense, okay? So this is, it doesn't matter what parameter you click. So for instance, let's say I like this particular drum I have has some interesting like features. Like it has this filter button. Notice how this changes. First of all, the graph will change, but also this readout will change. So look at this. This readout is saying now I'm trying to automate something on this 707 Funky Beans device, which is right here, this device right here. And within that specific device, I'm trying to automate this particular parameter called filter. Okay? So that's basically all you have to do. It's really super simple when you think about it, because you literally click a parameter. First of all, you have to be in automation mode. You press A to be in automation mode. And then you literally just click a parameter, and then you can basically draw a graph shape, right? And you can even like transform the length of the automation. This is like a this feature right here is something that I requested personally on Ableton's support group, and they added it. So not to brag or anything, but they added this particular feature for stretching automation, and I use it all the time, and no other DAW except Studio One has this feature, which is really cool. You can even like, these are the automation. This is called the automation transform tool. Okay, so yeah, you can draw in automation lines, do all kinds of stuff. Let me read the chat just to see what's going on. By the way, do you see the chat on the screen right now? Just curious. Oh, you see the chat? You don't see the okay, you don't see it. Okay, good. It should hide that. That's what I was just asking. All right. When I right-click the red line at the bottom under Insert Shapes, only shows the one option for me. Does that mean that this instrument drum kit can only use that shape? So here's the thing. Certain things only, that's a very good question. I've never even thought about that. I didn't even realize that was a thing. I did know about the shapes, but if you right-click in the automation lane, you can basically select shapes to automate. So for instance, if I choose show automation, I can basically choose this triangle shape, or I can choose this square wave shape, or I can choose this noisy shape, right? But with certain parameters, there's only certain sensible things. Like for instance, for turning a device on and off, there's only two states. There's the on state and there's the off state, right? So it doesn't make sense to have this like sinusoidal shape. It's like literally there's two shapes. There's two states, on and off. So in case you didn't know this, you could right click and draw shapes. But there's only certain shapes make sense for certain parameters, because only certain parameters only have certain states, okay? And then someone asked, when I extend the notes and change the length, it is unaliased and the track appears to last 15 bars, but sound only plays for the beginning of each note. Does each note only play for one beat? Or do I need to duplicate the notes instead of stretching them? Now that, my friend, is a deep question. And I have to think about that, because that is a interesting question. So you extend the notes. Can you actually explain that in like by chat, or like with your voice? Because that's a big question.
Okay, so I'm still using the chords from the files you gave us.
Uh-huh.
And so I extended the length of the clip, so now it's 15 measures long. And I went to like the piano roll and I extended the notes, but now it only plays like the beginning of the note still. It doesn't last for 15 measures.
Okay.
Or
Stop sharing and share your screen so I can see what's going on.
okay.
These are good questions.
This. And when I play it,
Oh, okay. There's two things. Okay. Immediately, I could tell that this instrument is a monophonic instrument and not a polyphonic instrument, which means you can only hear one simultaneous note at a time. Because notice how when it goes do do do, you don't hear this. Oops, you don't hear that. You hear. Okay. So that is a problem. That's a function of the instrument that you added. So your instrument, I can see at the very bottom in device view, it says piano muted pure. What I speculate is if you go to sounds in the browser.
here?
Yeah, and search like grand piano in the search field. Okay. Now, drop down menu for piano and key, and try the bottom one, the grand piano one, and drag it onto the. Well, don't double click it.
Oh, oops.
That's okay.
Okay.
Just actually, that might have actually worked, but just drag it into the track that says E piano muted. Anywhere there is fine, and now play it.
Okay.
Start at the beginning of the clip because it won't. It needs to register at the beginning of the note.
Okay.
Yeah, and just press play.
Yeah, I think it worked now.
Okay, great. So that has to do. Every single instrument has their own curiosities, right? We haven't talked about synthesis yet and how you can change the length of a note, how certain sounds have a naturally long decay. Certain sounds are very plucky, like like a water drop. It's like blip, blip. So if you try to extend a water drop sound for 16 measures, it's just going to sound like blip with 16 measures of silence, right? So you have to kind of be aware of what sounds you're working with, right? Okay, so that's a great question. Did I answer? There were a lot of things in that. I think yeah. So hopefully I answered all of your questions just now. Okay. Any other questions? Does this make sense so far? Please ask any questions if you have any. I could also kind of expound upon this a little bit more because I do have notes, right? You could set automation, just to kind of clarify. You can set automation in a couple of ways. Clicking the red line generates breakpoints. So you're pointing with a green arrow, you have breakpoints, okay? You can drag the points left or right to move the breakpoints earlier or later in time, okay? So if you are moving, if you're looking at a slider, right, and you're moving a breakpoint up and down, that corresponds to the slider moving right or left, right? So higher values on the graph means righter values on the slider. Lower values on the graph means lefter values. Lefter, that's not a word, but values on the slider. But if you're looking at a knob, higher values on the graph will correspond to clockwise directionality on the knob, and lower values on the graph will correspond to counterclockwise values on the knob. That's probably intuitive to you, but I just put this in here in case it helped, okay? This is the invention. This is the method that I requested, and Ableton added it. So yeah, so for instance, if you have an existing automation, if you have existing automation, so for instance, let me go back to the volume automation. Let's say I have this automation right here. This is a bad example. Let's say I have like a sine shape automation, okay? And let's say I have this sinusoidal shape, right? And I want to proportionally extend the sine wave so that it like lasts up till here, right? There's no good way to do this, right? Because you move one point, now you don't have a perfect sine wave anymore, right? This is like a jag. This does not look like a sine wave anymore, right? So we're presented with a problem. You really like this automation, but you want it to last a little bit longer. You want to change you want to maintain the proportion of what you have here, but you want it to occur over a different window of time, okay? So notice how there's these little dots that appear right here. You can grab any of these dots and you could proportionally change the length of this automation. Now this, I still am so grateful that Ableton added this because it's just awesome, right? So you can change, you see how it's still a perfect sine wave shape, but you're just basically changing the length, right? You can also change, you can squash it up, squash it down, things like that, right? So there's so much stuff that you can gain from automation. It's like, think about like a parameter is a picture, but automation is you're creating a movie, right? You're creating changes in state over time, okay? Okay, with that being said, I think we're just about out of time. So I will, also for those of you who are trying to, I'm still working on getting a mysterious link working. I still have to figure out, for those of you know what I'm talking, for those of you who know what I'm talking about when I say that, I still have to work on that. But with that being said, let us adjourn, and I'll stick around if anyone has any questions. And I will, I guess I'll leave it here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor. I have a small question.
Sure, who is speaking?
It's Mark.
Mark, okay, yeah, nice.
Is there, if I have like a really long note, is there a way to like just fade out that note without having to deal with the entire clip?
Without dealing with automation?
Yeah, with like the entire clip.
So for instance, like, can you share your screen?
Yeah. Sure sound. So like there's this long note here. That one, yeah. And I want to like fade it, you know?
Needs the note. Okay.
Yeah, just this singular note.
Okay, so in order to do that, this is what I would recommend. There's so many ways to do this. I'm going to request remote control. There's a couple ways to do this. One, you could go to the synthesizer itself that's making the sound and automate the release of that note. So for instance, we went to the synthesizer, presumably, yeah. So each one of these notes, I mean, this is a more complicated way of doing it. What I would probably do is this. I would probably just go to volume automation and just, you selected automation. I guess I'll turn off the draw tool. And ooh, nice cursor. And I would probably just do something like that. That's probably the simplest way to do it. You know what I mean? Or you
okay.
Yeah, just so it fades over time. But reality, what you want to do to get to the heart of the matter is you probably want to issue an envelope correctly. Like you probably want all notes to kind of feel, maybe you want all notes to decay a little quicker, right? In that case, you have to, this is jumping ahead, but if you go to the envelope, what this is basically referring to is the shape of the volume of the note. It's basically the automation of the volume on a note by note basis. So this note gets louder and then it gets softer and then it tapers off. So what you have to basically do is like make it taper off quicker, which is like this parameter right here. Because right now it's tapering off over a longer period of time. It's complicated. Like there's certain things you can do, but for simplicity, I'd probably just automate the volume of the note using this. But if you get into it, you can affect the envelope. And that's basically automation, but occurring on a note by note basis. So.
Yep. All right. That's it.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Any other questions? Oh, someone asked, I just joined the course this weekend. What should I do for now? How did you get in? There's like a wait list. And also all this information is on the OneNote. So basically you just go to the course announcement, you find the OneNote, and then you have this gigantic thing that everyone that you saw me use in class. Like you basically have access to this big notebook with all the homework, with all the lecture videos. There you go. And yeah, I guess I'll stop.